Hi, I'm Lou, and today I'm going to show you how to install Pergo laminate flooring. You'll need a hammer, a beading block, 3/8" spacers, an oscillating saw, and a chop saw. Start with a clean, flat subfloor. If you have carpet, you'll have to tear that up along with the carpet pad and tack strips. I would strongly suggest you get the Pergo that has the foam backing already glued on. Otherwise, you have to buy it in rolls at about 30 cents a square foot. It looks best if you run the boards long ways in the room. Use spacers to keep the flooring 3/8 away from all walls. Start the first row along the wall. You put the pieces together at a slight angle and then push down to lock them in place. If you get a small gap like this, put your beading block right here and give it a few taps, and that'll close it right up. When you get to the end wall, you're going to need to cut a piece. The easiest way to mark for cutting is to flip the board around and set your 3/8 spacer right on top of this lip and against the wall. Then line up your square perfectly even with the board below and score it with a knife. Line the score line up with your blade and cut for the perfect fit. When putting in your next row, slide them all the way down to where they're hitting this but not locked in yet. Lift the board up at a slight angle, push it in, and push down. Fix any little gaps like this by tapping on your block with a hammer. Now tap on this end to close that gap. After 4 rows, I pulverized this poplar beater block, so I made a new one out of oak. Also added this slot right here, which perfectly fits like that and makes it easier to hammer. If you don't have the ability to cut a slot like this on a table saw, then you can buy the beater block from Pergo, which is made of rubber and looks just like this. Often when you're tapping a plank into place, it won't go because this end is a little too high. The end of the plank needs to be held down while you tap it in. If you don't have a helper, this can be accomplished by reaching back with one foot while you pound. A quick word about board spacing. They're all 4 feet long, so if you want a brick type pattern, just move each row down 2 feet. The other option is alternating between a 1 and 2 foot spacing on the rows to give it a more random look. When you come to a vent, temporarily install the next board over the top of the vent. Reach under and mark along the vent on the bottom side of the board. Pull it back up, and now we know where to cut. The oscillating saw is perfect for plunging in and cutting along this line. If you stack a couple of scraps behind it, you can hit this with a chop saw. And finish from the top. And back in it goes. After laying flooring for a while, you soon realize that pretty much every plank needs a small tap to lock it in place. Unfortunately, when you get to the end wall, there's no way you're going to get a hammer in here to close this gap. One way to handle this is to put a board against the wall and a pry bar in here and push really hard until it pops in place. Another option is to buy a tool that looks like this, only it's made of metal, and it's called a pull bar. Basically, you set it over the edge of your board and you hammer right here. When you come to the last row, you can't just flip this board around and mark it like we did on the end rows, or else it'll come out backward. So what you do instead is put the spacer against the wall and measure to this finished edge right here, and then mark that same measurement from this finished edge over to here, and do the same thing at the other end of the board. Then stretch a long piece of tape between your 2 marks. You can get a lot of this cut with a chop saw, especially if it's a slider. You can finish with your oscillating saw, or find a friend with a table saw, and pop it in. If your Pergo is waterproof, you have to finish with 3/8" foam rope along the edge, and then 100% silicone on top of that. Finally, you put in base trim, and if needed, either quarter round or shoe mold. If you have any vertical molding that you want the plank to go under, take the plank out, put in a piece of scrap, use the oscillating saw to undercut, pull out the cut piece of trim, and slide in your plank. Doorways can be a little tricky, especially when you need to change heights as I do onto this bathroom tile. Pergo sells this threshold molding kit. It looks something like this and matches your floor color. Its main advantage is that it allows you to maintain that 3/8 gap. Its disadvantages are that it adds a bump to the floor and doesn't handle differing heights very well. Instead, what I'm going to do is put in a small wooden spacer that brings my plank up to the tiles level on this side. Then I'll put down some construction adhesive. This will act partially as glue, but mainly as support when it dries. Here's the threshold before it goes in, and here it is installed. In the end, it's a little hard to tell where the Pergo ends and the tile begins. Because someone will ask, this is Woods Style Selections porcelain tile in graphite color, and this is Pergo Outlast Plus in vintage pewter oak. This stuff is supposed to be waterproof. So I soaked one of my scraps for 8 hours. And I'll cut it in half. And sure enough, this stuff is bone dry inside. Here it is, all installed. Thank you for watching, and good luck installing your Pergo flooring.